others.
As witch hunts spread across Europe, the methods used to punish the accused became more gruesome. These early forms of punishment were designed to force confessions, or at the very least, prove guilt through horrific means. One of the most terrifying punishments was the dunking stool. The accused witch was tied to a chair and dunked in water. If the person drowned, it meant they were innocent but had lost their life. If they survived, it was thought to prove their guilt, as witches were believed to reject water. Sadly, surviving usually led to execution. This method showed how superstitions about witches and their powers controlled people's actions, even leading to death. Trial by fire was another brutal test. The accused would have to walk barefoot over hot iron or through flames. If they were unharmed, it was believed that divine protection saved them and they were innocent. But this almost never happened. Most of the time, they were burned, which was seen as proof of their guilt. These trials reflected the idea that witches could only be saved through miracles, and if they were hurt, it meant they were guilty. The scold's bridle was a cruel and humiliating device used mostly on women. This metal mask was placed over the woman's head and a plate pushed into her mouth, silencing her. It was used to punish women accused of witchcraft or being troublesome. It didn't just punish the body, it humiliated the person and isolated them from the community. The bridle caused physical pain and left emotional scars as well. Public flogging was another common punishment. Suspected witches were tied up and whipped in front of crowds. It was a way to punish them publicly and to set an example for others. While flogging didn't always end in death, it was a terrifying punishment that left lasting marks on the body. It often led to further torture or execution. These early punishments were designed to control and scare people. They showed how deep the fear of witchcraft was and how it led to deadly consequences for those accused. The methods were meant to humiliate, harm, and break the spirit of the accused. During the witch trials, torture was the main way to get confessions. Authorities believed that if they caused enough pain, the accused witches would confess and name others. These cruel methods led to unimaginable suffering and false confessions. The rack was one of the most feared torture devices. Victims were tied up by their wrists and ankles, then stretched using a crank. This dislocated joints and tore muscles, causing unbearable pain. Many victims confessed just to stop the agony. The damage was severe, with broken bones and permanent disability. The sight of the rack alone terrified people and kept others from questioning the trials. Thumbscrews were used to crush the fingers, while leg vices were made to crush bones in the legs. These devices applied immense pressure, causing excruciating pain. Victims often confessed quickly, sometimes making up names of other supposed witches just to end the pain. These tools were easy to use, making them common during interrogations. This horrifying device was inserted into the mouth, rectum, or vagina. It expanded like a screw, tearing tissues and causing severe internal damage. Though not as widely used, the pair of anguish was incredibly painful and humiliating. It was designed to break the spirit of the accused and force them to comply. In this method, victims were tied by their arms behind their backs and hoisted into the air by a rope. Sudden jerks or drops caused excruciating pain and dislocated shoulders. The prolonged hanging led to nerve and muscle damage, and many victims confessed just to avoid further suffering. These torture methods were meant to break the will of the accused. Many confessed out of fear and pain, leading to a cycle of accusations and innocent people being ruined. The suffering of those accused of witchcraft was beyond imagination. One of the most infamous ways witches were executed was by burning at the stake. The punishment was thought to purify the soul through fire, based on the belief that witches had made a deal with the devil. Victims were tied to a wooden stake, surrounded by wood, and set on fire. This execution wasn't just about killing the accused, It was meant to terrify people into not practicing witchcraft. Joan of Arc's execution in 1431 is one of the most well-known examples. It was meant to be a public spectacle to strike fear into the hearts of anyone who might dare to challenge authority. Hanging was another common execution method during witch hunts. It was easier and less resource-intensive compared to burning. In the Salem witch trials, for example, 19 people were hanged for being witches. The trials were fueled by fear, and public hangings became a way to showcase the power of the authorities. Crowds often gathered to watch these executions, turning them into morbid events that both punished the accused and entertained onlookers. Pressing to death was a particularly brutal and slow method of execution. The accused were laid down, and heavy stones or weights were placed on them. The weight was increased gradually until the person either confessed or died. One of the most famous cases of pressing happened in the Salem witch trials. Giles Corey, a farmer, was pressed to death for refusing to enter a plea. His last words were, "More weight," a chilling example of defiance even in the face of certain death. Although not as common as the others, beheading was sometimes used for people of higher social status. It was considered a merciful way to die compared to burning. In Scotland, Lady Alice Kyteler, a woman accused of witchcraft in the 14th century, narrowly escaped beheading, though her maid was not so lucky. These executions were more than just punishments. They were meant to send a message to society, reinforcing fear and control. The cruel and public nature of these methods left deep scars on communities and marked one of the darkest chapters in history. During the witch trials, many accused individuals faced cruel, psychological, and degrading punishments that were just as damaging as the physical ones. These punishments were meant to break the spirit of the accused and ruin their reputation forever. Suspected witches were often locked in cold, dark dungeons with little food or water. The harsh conditions left them weak, frightened, and desperate. Without anyone to talk to, their minds started to unravel. The isolation was meant to break them down and make them confess. But many became so weak that the authorities twisted their suffering into proof of guilt. Accused witches were paraded through the streets for everyone to see. They were forced to wear signs that explained their supposed crimes, making them targets for abuse. People would shout insults and throw things at them. In England, some women were put in stocks, forced to sit in front of crowds while being humiliated. This public punishment destroyed their dignity even before their trials began. Often, the authorities used torture to force confessions of devil worship. Those accused were made to admit things they didn't do to escape the pain. Even after death, these false confessions stained their reputation, making it impossible for their families to ever escape the shame. Investigators would search for devil's marks, such as moles or scars, which they believed proved a person had made a pact with Satan. These examinations were invasive and humiliating. It was a deeply degrading practice that often led to false accusations. These punishments weren't just physical. They shattered the self-worth of the accused, leaving lasting scars on their communities. The fear and shame caused by these trials spread like a dark cloud for generations. While some methods of punishment remained consistent, others varied depending on where the trials took place. Over time, the fear-driven witch hunts came to an end, but not before leaving a legacy of terror and injustice. In Europe, inquisitions in France, Spain, and Germany were particularly brutal. The Spanish Inquisition's rigid enforcement of orthodoxy led to severe torture and public executions. Germany saw some of the most intense hunts, with mass burnings as hysteria spread. In America, the Salem witch trials of 1692 were fueled by religious fervor and local disputes. 19 accused witches were hanged, and many others faced harsh imprisonment or public scorn. In Scotland and England, King James VI's demonology encouraged witch hunts, leading to cruel trials and executions. Scottish trials were marked by torture, while England focused on public hangings. By the Enlightenment, reason began to challenge superstition. Changing laws and awareness of past injustices led to the decline of witch trials. Societies started valuing evidence and fairness, ending centuries of persecution. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more of that history crack.